Okay, so today we're going to do rear brakes on a 2004 Chevy Silverado 1500. This is LT. Now, this is pretty much one of the last years that they use disc brakes in the back. As you know, if you have a newer vehicle, you have drums in the rear. This is a combo setup where it has a drum set for the parking brake that's in the center of the actual rotor, and then the outside it's a disc. Now, on most of these you don't have to do this too often. I mean, this truck has 140,000 miles and it's going to have the first change ever done on it. There's a lot of options on these things, so you'll find that when you go in, they'll ask you if it was a Canadian truck, if it was a Mexican truck, if it was made in, if it has dual piston in the rear, 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive. So you need to know all that, before you can get in there, and you can find most of that in your manual or inside of your driver's door. It'll have that information. So I am going to do a simple job where I'm just going to swap the pads. Normally you want to go and have these rotors resurfaced, but these are the larger ones because they have a drum in the center. Not just any place can use a lathe on it. They have to have a special lathe that has the extra room on the inside here, otherwise it won't work. So that for me is the deal breaker. Also, on these trucks, it doesn't make a huge difference because the back brakes don't do very much of the stopping. Now, if you have indentations in your rotors or the rear rotors are warped or anything like that, then obviously yes, you want to. You can also use an abrasive pad and rough the rotors up that way as well. But for the most part, the discs themselves are actually in very good condition. They don't look glossy, anything like that. So I'm simply going to switch the pads. So we'll go through that process in just a moment. So first things first, we're going to want to go ahead and jack the rear end up here. Before we do that, we want to put a wheel chock and obviously put the vehicle in park. In this case, because the parking brake is on the back wheels, obviously, we're going to have to chock the front wheels and release the parking brake before lifting it. Now, we're going to take a jack and right under the bottom of the pumpkin here, we're going to use a piece of wood between the jack and the pumpkin on the rear end so that we don't damage the pumpkin. So now we're going to go ahead and jack up. You're going to hear the wood crack. Much rather hear the wood crack. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can do it the first way, you put jack stands under it. That's the safest way. It's the way you traditionally should do it. In this case, I'm kind of doing this for speed, so do as I say, not as I do kind of situation. So we're going to go ahead, and now we have both wheels off the ground. We are chocked in the front. We're going to go ahead and remove the wheels and take a look at the rotors and the pads and go ahead and get those replaced. As per the norm, as soon as I go to start doing any kind of work, it's windy as hell, so I apologize if you got any wind noise. Now, two things here. It looks like I forgot something. I did go and pick this up. I don't know if I'm keeping it. This is supposed to be stronger than my Milwaukee here, brushless. Now this is a brush motor. Running a 3.5 amp battery that I have with it. It was bought as bare tools at $139. It has LEDs in it. That's the reason I kind of liked it. And it was rated at 300 foot-pounds. Now this is rated significantly less. I think it's like 180 or something down those lines. Don't mark my words on that. But I actually went and used it, and this couldn't break something loose, but this did. So I was kind of shocked because this is supposed to have a lot more power. Go figure. So anyways, we got 6 lugs here. There are 22 millimeter lug nuts. You got probably on there, torqued on there pretty good. I was the last one to torque them, so we'll see if we can break them loose with just using these instead of having to use my trusty air impact. Put it on, rewind. It's 3 speed, so it's on the 3rd speed. Let's see what we get. Did okay. Took a little bit, but that wasn't bad. Now, more power. Let's see how she does. Yeah, that was easier. Alright, maybe it was just a fluke. We'll get it, taking it off with this, and we'll try to do it for speed and see how quickly we can do it. Definitely noisier. It didn't do a bad job. I don't like how noisy it is though. The Milwaukee will break them loose, but it's not as not as noisy. So go ahead and take them off. Before taking this on too, remember how heavy these wheels are. They can be up to 60 pounds. These aren't quite that heavy. This depends on the rim and everything that you have. Steel rims will be lighter, aluminum rims sometimes will be heavier. It all depends on what you have. So be sure you can, lift off that kind of weight, because when you put these back on, you kind of have to slide them back onto the hub before screwing down the lugs. So you just want to make sure that you have the strength to take those off, put it back on before you get started. Okay, so here it is. It looks in good condition. I mean, you just really have to just kind of take a look at it. I mean, if this was super glossy or had ridges or anything like that, I'd be more concerned, but really I'm not. This all looks in really, really good condition. Any sliding caliper, there's going to be 2 bolts on the back side here, and you're just going to basically just loosen them up. You can clean this the caliper assembly first, to each their own, however you want to go about it. I'm going to break them loose first and just kind of take a look. Also, only do one side at a time, because when we're done here, what we'll have to do is collapse the piston cylinder on here. And if you do both at the same time, obviously you're going to just push the pressure to the other side, so you definitely don't want to go down that road. You're not saving time doing that, so one side at a time. So best part about doing brakes, basic tools will do. And you just need a basic ratchet set. So this is a heavy rubber mallet. It's a dead blow, 1.5 pound. This will help when you're trying to break them loose so you don't bust your knuckles or anything. So we'll save that. Also, you can break your ratchet, but if you have a lifetime warranty, it shouldn't matter. And it looks like it's going to be probably 13. Never know what you're going to get. It's fitting 13, but it might be ½ inch, because that's the conversion. I stick with metric. So make sure the ratchet's ready to go. So let's get back to reference here. We're on the driver's side, so just remember that. Sometimes when you're working backwards, just double check that you're loosening and not tightening, because sometimes when you flip it backwards, you kind of lose your orientation and it can screw you up. So 2 ways to do this. Number 1, you can just yank on it. Number 2, get a couple hits, breaks it loose a lot easier. You don't bust your hands up. Sometimes these, depending if they've been done before, sometimes if they haven't been done before, they get seized on there pretty good. So we'll slowly back this out. There it is. Make sure to keep parts where you can remember where they're at. There's another one on the lower side here. Like I said, it just makes it easier. These back brakes are pretty dirty. Not dirty, I think they just have like something encrusted on them. They're not dirty, and like if you wipe your hand on them, there's not a lot coming off of them. Okay, so once those 2 are out, it simply just slides off here. That's it. So there's our caliper. Let's talk a little bit about brakes themselves. That's your piston. What this is doing is, this is what's called a slide caliper or floating caliper, and what it's actually doing is this assembly allows it to more or less float. So there's 2 rubber ends here, and this whole assembly can move in and out on its own. So when you press your brake pedal, your piston's coming out and it's actually squeezing onto the 2 sides of this rotor. That's it. It's pretty basic. You just want to make sure you don't see any leaks on here, or just looking for damage in general, and it looks okay. So we'll go ahead and set this off to the side. Some cars you'll have to zip tie them away, but this one, not a big deal. Now I noticed these right off the bat when I first got this truck. That's an interesting design. I've never seen those before. Either these got bent or they're supposed to be bent like that. I've never actually seen them bent before. But anyways, you can see I was like right there. It was right about ready to hit the wear indicator, and this is what you hear when you squeal. Is this piece of metal will make contact with the rotor. And that's just a warning that you're less than 2 millimeters left on your pad. So I'll set that off to the side. Inside, so remember you have 2 pads per wheel. So
You know, some people get confused when they see, you know, a pair of front brake pads and they see 4 pads. Remember, each disc has 2 pads, one for either side of the disc, because it's clamping down on that disc. So next thing you pretty much want to do here is go ahead and wipe down and clean up this mess that you have made here. So once that's finished, you want to grease the slides. So there's 2 things here to grease. Number 1 is these pins right here can be taken out by just holding the grommet, which is where the rubber meets it, and you just slide out. And you can see that this is dried out completely. That's not supposed to be like that. It should have some lubricant on there, so we'll go ahead and add lubricant back onto that. Don't just yank. Remember, you got to pull this rubber gasket away. This one has a little bit on it. This is not surprising. This just happens. The truck here is a 2004, so obviously it's about 9 to 10 years old, so sometimes this will happen. So don't be super concerned about it. As long as there's not damage or marring on it, you can kind of just work with what you have there. So now go ahead and clean things up and get our new pads. Like I said, if I slide my fingers across here, there's no damage to this rotor. To get this rotor off is more work, and what you're going to have to do is take the 2 back bolts off and then attach the actual hub assembly to the carrier unit for the caliper. So if you want to do that, you are more than welcome to do that, but it's more work, and to get this disc off, it can be hard. It really can be, because like I said, there's a drum assembly inside here that is activated by the parking brake. A lot of times this gets stuck, and believe me, you'll spend a lot of time sitting here trying to hammer at this end, trying to break this loose or get a puller or something down those lines just to yank it off. But this rust indicator here tells me that this is going to be a nightmare to pull off, so no thank you. This feels pretty good. 15% of the braking only comes to the back anyways, and on these trucks it's actually less than that, because that's why they got away from using these discs. As you can see, it's a very small area here that it's using to clamp down on, so there's not a lot of braking force that comes from back here. Now, if you're getting like telltale signs, like you're getting weird noises from the back, or it feels like it's vibrating but your front brakes have already been done, in that case, yeah, go ahead and knock yourself out. But in this case, I'm not going to concern myself with it. I'm going to go ahead and just do what's called a slap job. I will just go ahead and slap new ones on there. Also, buy yourself some gloves. It saves your hands. Obviously, a lot of those brakes are asbestos, so make sure that you're in a clear area where there's air flowing through. I'm outside, so that helps. And just keep the dust down. A lot of times that's why people spray them down when they begin to, is to knock all that dust down, so you're not breathing that stuff in. So next step, we're going to go ahead and clean. Okay, I always like to keep my old oily rags because they're good for this kind of stuff. This will be their last hurrah, per se. So you can use that to. So you want to clean the slides, because these are going to have to be greased. This is where the pads slide back and forth. So you want to make sure there's no debris caught in those. All around. Remember, 1 pad on the outside, 1 on the inside. So we'll have to clean all 4. Just wipe it down. So at this time too, we didn't really talk about it, but the pads themselves, you want to make sure that they were wearing evenly, which in this case they definitely were. I mean, you can see the difference here. They're almost exactly the same wear, the same amount of wear. So that's always a really good sign that your brakes are working properly. Because if it's wearing one side or another, remember how I showed you the slides right here? That's usually your issue, is that the slides are not activating properly. So, same thing, I'm going to go to the piston here, just kind of wipe things down. You can make it as clean as you want it. It doesn't need to be super clean, but like I said, you can make it as clean as you're comfortable with. Mainly, you want to just clean all the contact areas, all the areas where the brake pads will be contacting with metal or whatever. So those areas are in good condition, because they're going to be used a lot, obviously. So that's that. Yeah. Also, this hardware right here simply just pops out if you needed to replace it, or if it fell out. You can usually, it's usually hard to find to buy it by itself, but if you buy more expensive brake pads, you'll usually find that this hardware is included. So it just snaps in. And it's more like a bushing if you really think about it. It's between two pieces of metal, so it's acting as a bushing. When you put them in, just be careful that they go in correctly, because if they go in too far, obviously they're going to make contact here with the rotor, so make sure that goes in like it's supposed to. So everything feels pretty good. I think we're okay to go ahead and start greasing these up and get ready for the new pads. Okay, I'm back. So first thing I have here is a lubricant, and this lubricant's going to be put on the slides and also on the slides and then also on the bushing assemblies and the back of the brake pads, and this is going to allow the pads to operate as they should, and it won't come off. So set to the side. Next thing you need is this device is for collapsing the cylinder on the caliper. Absolutely need it. They're about $10. Any local auto parts store will carry them. Now also got our new pads. You always want to compare your old pads with your new pads. Make sure they're the same. Also make an indication in your mind when you do this. Also make sure that you remember what side has the wear indicator on it. In this case, it's on the inside, on the outside here. So this one would be the outside pad. And you'll see that when you get the pads that, well, you know what? These are Duralast pads from AutoZone, but these are I think the semi-metallic. They actually both have a wear indicator on them. I actually hadn't seen that before. That's actually pretty cool. So that means that if either pad wears down first, because remember I told you sometimes they'll wear unevenly, it won't matter because they both have wear indicators. So that little indicator there is there. So it doesn't matter which one you put where. So that's actually a good thing. Okay, so first step here we want to go ahead and do is go ahead and collapse the cylinder here. You're going to use your one of your old brake pads, and here you can see this. Nope, you can't see this. So let's put this where you can see it. Take one of your old pads and stick it in here with your collapsers tool. You also want to grease this every once in a while. It makes it a lot easier to use. I see a lot of people struggling with these because the screw won't turn because it's not greased. So you want to slip it in there like that, and then you're just going to tighten it. And what it's going to do is it's going to compress that cylinder back in there. You also want to double check your reservoir, make sure it's not overfilled, because if you back this up, it's going to push fluid back through the system and you're going to start spilling brake fluid everywhere, which is probably not what you want to do. So slowly here, we're going to go ahead and we want to do this always slowly. You don't want to do this fast, because what's happening is it's pushing fluid back through the system. You don't want to damage any of your brake system parts. You also don't want to you want to make sure that this gasket seats back in there correctly. So slow, steady turns. And you also listen for any sounds, because you shouldn't hear any popping or anything like that. If you hear anything like that, you might have some trouble. You also just, because like sometimes you'll get air pocket in these in the gasket here, and you don't want that. So you want to collapse it all the way down. Make sure it goes all the way in. Then you just unscrew this. This slides out. Barrel pad out of the way, and you see what happened. Some crap in there. An air pocket got stuck in there. So what we want to do is just press that air out, and like that. Now we're flat again. Do not let an air pocket sit there, because if your brakes start into going, or you start, it gets this stuck in it, it's going to rip a hole in that gasket, and it's going to make a mess that you don't want to get into. So set that off to the side again. I love having a truck because leaf spring acts as a good setting area for you to set stuff down. Okay, so next step, I'm going to take my greaser. You can get small little single-use versions of this from any auto parts store. You don't need a big one unless you do a lot of brakes like I do. So we'll put just some in here, and then on the inside as well. You're just basically just painting it on. This is not more the merrier. You're just going to want to put a light coat on there. Okay, so now we'll take the slides out, clean them, because you don't want any foreign contaminants on those. Do one at a time so you don't mix them up. You want them to go in the same way as they came out. You'll also notice too here that this is threaded right here. This isn't screwing, and sometimes what will end up happening is when you go to tighten your new ones, this is going to spin. You don't want that, so you'll need to use a crescent wrench on the inside here when you go to tighten with your socket wrench at the same time. So now this is where you can be crazy, put as much on there as you want, because this is where it matters. This is going to have a lot of pressure on it when it's sliding. It's holding that caliper in place. So we'll take that, slide that back in there, and we'll do it once, and we'll bring it back out again, and we'll do it one more time. See, there's some gunk on there. If you pull gunk back out, make sure to wipe it off, and then you can add more grease on there again. You can go hog wild if you want with this too, and get Q-tips and everything and clean out the inside of that slide. One thing you don't want either is you don't want air getting stuck in there, so make sure that when you slide this in here that you move it around to get any kind of air pockets out of there. So you don't want this trying to push out. So take the next one out, same thing. Spray it off with some brake cleaner. Clean it off and grease it. Most brake jobs will take, you can do as much as you want. You can, go hog crazy, or you can just, do the basics. You see a lot of crud came off with that, so we'll wipe this off and do it again. A little bit being in there is not going to hurt anything. Mainly, you just want a good, it can be synthetic, a good grease on there that's going to do its job, and that's just making sure that this assembly moves properly. So it should move freely. I mean, when you move these back and forth, because what these are doing is actually, they're like, think of them as like struts or shocks, absorbers. They're holding this so it doesn't shake, that this doesn't transfer into the body. So that's that. Now we can start putting some pads on. So we'll take a little bit of grease. We'll grease the contact areas, and we'll put grease on the back of back here. Now, a lot of people ask why you do that, and the reason is because you want this to act as a bushing between the caliper and the brake pad. That a lot of times that's where squealing is going to come from. So you want to just make sure that you try to mitigate that, and the best way is to put some grease there to act as an intermediary between the two. Same thing with this one. A little grease in the contact areas. And back. There's different types of stuff you can use for this, but this, I've always found this works fine. Now, if this front pad, sometimes you'll use the glue type stuff where it kind of glues it into place. But newer pads have gotten, the materials they use are much better than they used to be. So same thing. Take that, and we'll slide into place. Now you'll see the pads are just right there, and they're together, and we can start reassembling. Reversal of how we did it. Now the question I have is, I see that there's bushings in the top here. I'm thinking I should probably put some grease on that as well, because they look like they make contact. You can put some on there too if you want, and the outsides are gripped on the outside here, so put a little bit on there if you want. And now we'll slide the pads on. We'll push in these two slides, and this goes back together. So remember, these two you have to push in for this to slide on all together. Now, if it gets stuck at the caliper, that's usually because you didn't collapse the cylinder completely. So make sure, if that happens, you go back to the step and check with this that it's been collapsed completely. Sometimes, if you wait a long time between doing it, that piston will on its own come out. Don't want that to happen, so you want to do this relatively quickly. So there we go. I'll go ahead and start these on here. You just want to start them. Don't take one all the way in. You want them to both get started at the same time, because otherwise it'll be harder to align them. So you want to do the top one first because you can see it better. Once you have that in, just kind of shake it around until you find the spot at which it starts to connect. And there it is. So now we'll go ahead and tighten this up. Okay, so like I said, on the inside here, there's a nut, and then on the outside you got your bolt. So you need to get yourself an 18 millimeter combination crescent wrench, and obviously you're going to use the open inside of it. Now the deal here is that sometimes these are too wide. In this case, this one's okay with the standard one. But some of these assemblies I've noticed have a really thin one, and they do that on purpose. They want you to take it to the dealership and have it fixed, so, or repaired or maintenance done. So they'll use what's called SST parts, meaning that you have to use a specialty tool to do the work. In this case, we're okay. So we'll go ahead and take this on the inside and then make sure your wrench is on tighten, righty tighty. Tighten that up, and the same thing on the bottom. Now you can get all fancy with this as well. Whip out the torque wrench. It is your decision. Right down, just past tight is good. So what I like to do, take it on there, just give it a couple of slugs. That's usually enough. Usually what I just did there would equate to about 50 foot-pounds of torque, and that's approximately where it should be, 40 to 50. Same thing here. It's all feel. So you can do it that way, you can use a cheater bar, you can do it all different ways. This works best for me. Now if you're close on your reservoir, because you're going to have to do the other side, you may want to pump your brakes now and go ahead and get this caliper to seat now, because sometimes you'll go to that side and you push it in and then you'll overflow. So you have that choice to do now while both sides are now sealed. And then if you're done with this, we can go ahead and start reassembling. So I'm going to take a look at here, make sure everything looks good, to verify that I've taken all the steps. And like I said, this is the way that I'm doing it, not necessarily the way you're going to do it. If you have rotor issues or anything like that, go ahead and take the extra step and go ahead and do that. In this case, like I said, you can see from here, these rotors are in very, very good condition. I don't have any problems with vibration when braking or anything like that, and if I did, that would be an issue. Now, if I start stomping on my brakes now, I start getting vibration or squealing or anything like that, I'll reconsider this decision. But for the most part, this generally works. This truck is not driven very much, so I'm not going to put as much time into this as I would another vehicle. So, like I said, you're at your own risk. You do it how you see fit. But this is a basic, it's what they would like to call a slap job, meaning that you're just slapping new pads on it. It's the cheapest way to do it. Pads themselves only cost about $21, and then you just need the normal tools that you find any basic mechanic should have. So, all done. We'll go ahead and get this back together. So I'll take my wheel here, which is not light. Remember that if you have any kind of issues lifting something heavy into place, it's probably not the job to try to take on. Okay, you want to make sure it's sitting flat against the hub. What the hub is this little circular thing here, and then make sure it sits right in it, flush up against the rotor. If you put your wheel on cockeyed or anything like that, you're going to know real fast. And what's even worse than that is that generally what's going to end up happening is you're going to break off the stems here, the lug nuts. You don't want to have to replace those, believe me, it's a pain in the ass. So we'll go through, we'll get these hand tightened first, just start getting them on. Some people do this different ways. They like to put one on and then lock it on the hub. It's usually not the smartest thing to do because it's unevenly pressuring on there. You want to start evenly across. This only takes an extra second. I'm going to go ahead and use my Milwaukee on this one. So lock it up there and just give it a little bit. Okay, now that should hold it in place. And at this point you should be able to see inside here that this is sitting flush, and you can also put your fingers behind the wheel, between the wheel and the rotor, and there should be no gaps. And I'll tell you whether or not you put it on right. So now I'll go across from here.
Now that that's on there, the wheel has been on there, it's not torqued yet, we will go ahead and drop the vehicle. At that point we'll use a torque wrench. When you're done with this, you want to go ahead and take the vehicle for a spin, gently, do about 20 miles an hour, come to a slow stop. Do that a few times. If everything feels like it's seating properly, you're good to go. If you feel anything, hear anything, hear popping sounds, time to go back home and check it. So we'll check it. So it's about a quarter turn off. We'll do, once again, star pattern. Yeah, it's pretty close. I mean, that's what I like about that is that it's not like an impact where you're almost past it already. And if you're superstitious, you can always go through one more time. And check it. Okay, all good. Now, key is that if your wheel's on crooked as well or didn't seat on the hub properly, look at the tips here. If one's sticking out more or less than another, that means the wheel's crooked. So that's another indicator that can tell you what went wrong. Now after this is done, like we talked about before, you want to pump your brakes, not hard, just quick pumps, and that will recollapse the cylinder on this side. It'll seat the pads, and you want to do that before you start the vehicle. You don't want to start the vehicle with no brakes, because it'll feel like you have no brakes. So remember to do that before you get started. Okay, so next step, go ahead and pump the brakes real fast, short and fast.
Which one?
Yeah, the brake pedal.
This one?
Pump. No, not all the way down. Short, quick burst. Like that. Does it feel like it's getting firmer?
Kind of.
Keep going. I think you're good. That's it. So here's your brake fluid. If you want to double check that it didn't refill. If it did, you need either a vacuum device or even like a turkey baster will work to remove fluid from it. It's very, very corrosive, so don't let it touch anything. And you can throw it out with regular oil, so you can just put it in with regular oil if you need to. So we'll take the cap off here, take a look inside. That fluid's a little dirty. What I'll do is I'll vacuum out some of that and I'll replace it. You want to make sure to use what it asks for, .3 or .4. .4 will also work. Anything higher, just not below, will be just as effective or even better. So we'll go ahead and do that. And with that, well, after this, we'll take our test drive around about 20 miles an hour. You just want to do some soft stops, make sure everything sounds okay, after which you are good to go. Okay, so we've gone ahead and tested our brakes and everything sounds good, so that's it, we're wrapped.